Hi, my name is Uli Hanisch. I'm the production designer of Queen's Gambit, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show. My name is Ben Consoli, and today's guest is Uli Hanisch, the production designer for The Queen's Gambit. Uli, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
I cannot wait to dive in. First of all, I was obsessed with Queen's Gambit, as I'm sure everybody watching was as well. It's just a fantastic show, and there's a lot to talk about. But before we get there, I just want to mention our sponsor, MZ Education for Creatives, and of course, encourage all of you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We've got exclusive YouTube content just for our subscribers, so hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Uli, first thing I want to get into is this obsession that our world has with the look and culture of the 1960s. I feel like this kind of happened with Mad Men. Mad Men sort of ushered in the appreciation of that mid-century modern look, the styles, and really brought the 60s kind of look back into the minds of all the people out there. And I think The Queen's Gambit takes this to the next level. Talk to me kind of about, what that mid-century modern period sort of is architecturally, design-wise. Why do you think we are so fascinated with it?
Well, I think you're right. I think Mad Men was quite a big or important influence to get back to the 60s in a way. But the funny thing is, just when we talk about it, I mean, Mad Men started, I think, something like almost 10 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's there for a long time already, you can say, I don't know exactly how it is in the US, but I would say here in Europe, maybe especially Germany, or specifically in Berlin where I live, I think the 60s have always been here as a style, something people like. And I think that the 60s have been a very fascinating decade or period, because I think when you look back into history, I think after the Second World War, it all started again through the 50s. And I think in the 60s, you had the first generation being kind of grown up and ready to change society and the whole Western life in a way. And I think it was a decade of spirit and of dynamic. And it was very hopeful and very bright and very young in a way. And I think that reflects on almost everything you will see or about the 60s. The colors, the shape, the whole style, everything was kind of nice and lean and bright. So I think the whole spirit of progression, is very much visible and touchable in every little detail of the 60s. That's why we love it so much.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it does represent change in our culture, change in our world. And that color and that pop and that fun is just so appealing. So, when this project comes to you and you now need to recreate the 60s for Queen's Gambit, what is your first step? How do you start finding the inspiration for it?
Well, I mean, the funny thing for the job I do is that it's never really separated from the story, what you're about to visualize. So in this case, I think the first step for me was really to read the novel. So the producer came up to me and said, "Look, we have this miniseries happen, and we want to come to Berlin or however. Please, can you read the novel and tell me what you think about it?" And the novel of Walter Tevis is just great. And I fell in love with the character and the problem she's facing and how she's dealing with it and all this kind of almost supernatural talent she has. So I think that the story was really the very first grip for me to take and to embrace. And then I think at that time we were still doing the third season of Babylon Berlin. And at that time we have been working for to recreate the 20s as a period for almost 4 or 5 years. And I was kind of, even though I love the 20s and I really love them a lot, and funny enough, they have they represent almost the same qualities what we just talked about, about the 60s, just on an earlier level and in a bit of a different level. That's also why people love the 20s so much, by the way. Yeah. The same reason in a way. It's just that the 60s obviously are a little bit closer to us as a generation. But I was so happy at that point to leave the 20s behind. And like you said, everybody loves the 60s. So do I. And I've done movies of the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s before. I've never done it in this way, and I've never done it on the American side of life in a way. So I was very excited to explore that. And then what happens when to prepare for every movie or every show or every project like this is always the same. You start to research, simple as that. It's always, in our case, it's always even in a way easier because the story, the subjects, and whatever kind of places and or technical worlds or whatever content in a way would come across or come along, and then you start to research for the specific worlds or places at that period. So, for example, for me, was very new, and because I've kind of never seen that before, was something simple as the orphanages. What would an orphanage look like in the 60s in America? I really had no idea. And that's something you just start to research and collect, and pictures and photographs and whatever. Start reading about it, and so we always kind of start what we call the visual concept kind of booklet, which usually is pre-designed and only really collects a couple of hundred or maybe thousands of images through the story and the period, and that's the starting point, really.
Now, do you have a staff with you? Like, are you with a team of people that are doing this research, or is this research phase just when it's you before you really start digging in too deep?
No, it's on the one hand, it's in our world, I'm not a company or something. I don't have people, steadily with me, but I have a group of people I usually work with. As I said, at that point, we were actually right in the middle of Babylon Berlin. So I was asking somebody, of course, from the crew who was not working with us at the time, just to join in, and she would sit with us in the same office and start doing that. So we were able to communicate, and because I know or knew at that time, if we would do the job, we would do it in Berlin, and we would do it with the same group of people anyway. So I just hired somebody else, and that's how we usually start. I usually have 2 or 3, like the closest colleagues, the closest group of I work with, and we start together. And usually we are 2 or 3 people, and we have a couple of weeks for this kind of research time.
Aside from just going on Google and looking around, are there resources that production designers kind of know about, little secrets that you guys use in your industry that just is beyond a typical Google search?
Maybe not. I think I think that maybe the difference is that over the years, of course, everybody around me, became quite an expert in about researching. So if I just remember how when we started to research on through the internet, which of course is entirely different than what we did before. I think looking back, I'm doing this quite a long. I think the last film I've done without using the internet was something like 2001 or something like that, maybe, right? And that was a period movie as well, which played in the 50s in Germany, and it was about soccer and football and all that stuff. So I remember we were, I think, also 3 people, and at that time we had like 6 weeks or something for the research. And I think the output and the amount of images and the quality of the image, which we were able to find at that point by having meetings with archives and traveling whatever to bookshops and libraries and stuff like this. I think we would do that nowadays with 2 people in a week or something. So I must say that, of course, searching through the internet made everything so much easier in a way. The only thing which is maybe to be said, if you compare, those kind of systems is or ways to do it is that the only good thing about wasting time is or spending so much time is the time itself. So the faster you go, the more you have a tendency to stay shallow. The more it's kind of difficult to find stuff and that you have to make just like 10 phone calls just before you get to the right person to talk to, and then make an appointment, and then go to meet the person, and then get the right images. Imagine how complicated that is, right?
Yeah.
And then in the end, you get 3 images. But maybe on the way to get those 3 images, you have learned other things, right? Now you spend a morning, in front of your computer, and you have 30 images, but you haven't learned a thing because it was so easy to get those images. So, I think it's interesting not only to look at the images or look for the images, but it's always very important to go to dig into the subjects you want to research about.
What is a production designer's role on a show, on a TV show? I mean, what was your role on Queen's Gambit? What was expected of you?
Well, I mean, the general thing about the production designer is, or the responsibility, or whatever, however you would call that, is to come up with an idea how the world is supposed or should look like or should be like the world we are building of the story we want to tell. So that is like the one phrase kind of answer, and of course it holds a lot of aspects. So that's the first point, I think, and then of course you need to talk to the producer or director. And I think what is the most important thing in the beginning is to find out what the motivation is in general. And I would always ask the director or the producer, why exactly do you want to spend all that time doing or talking about this issue or showing this kind of story? What is the motivation? Why are we doing this? And sometimes it's harder to find out, and sometimes it's very obvious. And here, with this very, very strong and struggling character, I thought it was rather easy to understand, the meaning behind it. And I also think that if the moment you have a specific and almost weird story like this, it makes it easier to find, your own system of choosing what is right and what is wrong. Because here in this
case,
because once you can decide that everything you're looking for, or what you want to design or decide about, if that goes through the brain or the eyes of your character, then you can't be wrong. And here in this case, knowing that you have this kind of lost soul, and she knows nothing about anything, and nobody ever took care about her education or her social skills or emotional skills or give love to her or whatever, makes her very peculiar. And I think also when you watch the series, you can see that the camera did exactly the same. The camera is very often not only either following her or looking through her eyes as a point of view kind of thing, and explores the world, which makes a big difference. So the filmmaker, the storyteller, is very interested about her and how she explores the world, and because of her abilities and the way the whole story is structured, I kind of realized in the beginning that we are always talking about a genre here. We are always talking about something like a fairy tale. And the moment you have this kind of headlines, on top, you can choose, or you can pick, you can make every decision through this headline. And once you want to tell a fairy tale, you have to build a different kind of world. I was watching some other shows, based in the 60s afterwards. And once they imagine you're telling a story about racism, and you have a black main character who's struggling in his life, and it's very political, and it's full of violence and injustice and stuff like this. It's impossible to create the same world for this kind of story.
Yeah. So as production designer, you're creating the world of the show. My assumption there is that you're basically touching every department. I mean, from wardrobe to props, probably even cinematography. So, I mean, you must be in direct communication with every department as you're creating this world.
Yes. I mean, props, kind of belong to our department anyway, and everything like cars and stuff like this. Costume is a different department. So here I'm not really working on that. I have conversations, but in a way, I kind of, as I said before, having all this conversation with the director in the beginning, and then I represent him. Maybe I represent the script. I represent the character or characters. And then I start walking and go and see what would be right for them, and that is, let's say, as I said, it's the first step in trying to get a hold of how the whole thing could look like. In a way, I don't know how the whole thing will look like in the beginning. I don't want that. I don't want to know that, because I think the whole process, which comes afterwards or through the entire process, is so much more interesting and important than my own little opinion in the beginning. So it's a development. And then, of course, what is interesting, especially on a show like this here, is when, imagine how funny it was for me when they asked me to do this, and I read the novel and I found out that 90% of the film plays in the US, and there's only this tiny part in Moscow and a tiny part in Paris. And I mean, let's say in this case, Mexico somehow belongs to the US, even though it doesn't, obviously. But this kind of world. And I asked them, why are you coming?
Why are you using me? Yes.
What do you want here? And
what did they say?
Exactly. And for them, it was very easy. They said, because we need to cover Paris, we need to cover Moscow, we need to come to Europe anyways. So we want to we are interested in how far we can get there. And that was their first question, into my direction, saying, what do you think? How much can we cover in Berlin? And then after analyzing the story for the first time, of course, realizing that it's so much an interior world, and she's not really interested in the exterior world, she's always inside, is simply said. And so she's, inside the orphanage, then, starting, in the basement. Then she's at the Wheatley house, of her adopting parents, what do you call it, foster parents. And from then on, she starts to travel. But then we see her in a plane, then we see her in a hotel room, and then we see her at a tournament. And that kind of goes on and on and on. And then we were kind of looking through our locations here in Berlin, thinking about some great and interesting and unusual places, especially for the tournaments. I think we started to look for all those tournament places, for all those ballrooms or conference rooms or classrooms or all this kind of stuff, and realized that we have a lot to offer in Berlin. Also, maybe because of the history of Berlin, because we have this kind of very clearly Western-based part, we have the Eastern-based part. We have also, because of the history, there was a lot of construction and architecture happening in the 60s in Berlin, because everything was destroyed, so it had to be rebuilt. So those are reasons for very many different kind of places and styles. And we put together a collection of location images and showed them to Scott Frank, the director, and to the producer Bill Holberg. And they were just blown away. They thought, they couldn't believe their eyes.
I'm glad you brought up finding locations for all the different chess tournaments, because you had a pretty significant challenge here. I mean, of all the people watching Queen's Gambit, I'm sure that there's a good percentage of people that really don't even have a general interest in chess, have never watched it, don't know how to play, don't know anything about it, and they're watching a show where so much of it is happening during chess tournaments. And you are tasked with having to, first of all, make people interested in something that they may otherwise not be, in this case, chess. And you also have to have all of these tournaments happen, but they're different. They look different. They get bigger. They get more established. There's so much happening. with these chess tournaments. What was the biggest challenge that you faced when having to, like I said, having to create worlds that people are interested in when the thing that they're watching may be something they know absolutely nothing about?
Yeah, it wasn't such a big challenge because it's the same for myself. I'm not into chess at all. I think my younger daughter taught me to play chess when she was 10 a couple of years ago, and we were playing from time to time, and I'm really bad. So I'm not really into it, and I it's just not the way my brain works. So it wasn't the same for me. I couldn't go through the chess itself, but I don't think that the whole story is about chess at all. Anyway, the chess and is just it's a funny example they picked, and it's much more about. It's basically, of course, about her problem of being disconnected or never, being connected to anybody, and trying to connect with the world. And then she's given this talent, and she's dealing with that, and also with the problems of that. So actually, everything she's doing she's doing everything we all do. She's kind of struggling her way into this world. And having kind of one battle after the other. Her battles are more complicated because she is so lost, and she has to kind of fight for so much because there was no place kind of given to her at all. And therefore, every tournament and every important chess game through the tournaments is representing some other kind of life battle. So sometimes it's like really a violent battle. Sometimes it's about romance. Sometimes it's about acceptance, whatever. So in a way, the whole journey is like a journey through life, and therefore our first idea or decision really was that, of course, also for ourselves to have a structure and an idea where we would be, and also for the audience is saying we wanna really make every individual step of her journey significantly different, and kind of meaningful with around the specific problems she's dealing with at that specific point. So and that is like that was the base for the visual concept, saying when we talk about Las Vegas, it's all this hideous, glamorous Las Vegas kind of style. It's a lot of tacky gold. It has a specific color range. So once we would have used this kind of stuff for Las Vegas, we would never use it again. Then, for example, Mexico before was like the pure opposite in a way. Everything was red and totally different. Then, of course, we had something like Paris, which represents clearly this kind of European old world kind of grandezza. And then coming to Moscow, where you have the brutalism and the Soviet kind of style, and everything is very dark and brown, and maybe black and white and heavy, and you don't really understand the rooms, and they're kind of frightening. And of course, the tournament place becomes like what you said, like a cathedral. We actually call it like we call it the Temple of Doom. This kind of intimidating situation for her. So, and if you follow those kind of ideas, then that's what I meant before. It makes it easier to come up with a decision or an idea. If you have all this range of tournament places, and if you don't, if it's clear what is the most important stuff, let's say about the Moscow tournament place, and it's this temple of chess, and the idea is, and the headline is intimidation, and also showing that how important chess is or has been at the Soviet Union, totally different in France, in Paris, where we decided that the tournament is called something like an elite kind of classy little thing. It's like a soiree at the afternoon. And you have like maximum, I think we had something like 20 something or 30 people sitting around, and everybody's sitting on little golden chairs and stuff. And it's extremely elegant and Parisian. And it's the sheer opposite than everything we did in Moscow. But once you have a strong subject and a theme, then you can't go wrong.
I want to talk about how you pair your designs with your characters. There's a few particular sets that I wanted to talk about, and certainly you can bring up any that you want as well. But I'd love to start with the Wheatley home, because that goes through a transformation midway after Alma passes away. So there's a significant change there because the ownership of the home changes. But talk to me about that. So you're designing this home for the foster adoptive parents of our main character. It's in the 60s, but it has to say something about Alma, her husband at the time, and the relationship. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, here, well, of course, the thing is with every kind of private home, an interior set or room, place, obviously has totally different kind of meanings for the story and for the characters, and also other possibilities. So the Wheatley house, in a way, was clearly the heart and soul of the entire story and the show. Plus that we knew that we have a lot of scenes happening there. So it's almost like the main set of the show in a way. So you can put a lot of effort into that. Much more than the place which you have like one scene playing and you just rush through it somehow. So and as you said, the thing is that once you start designing something like this interior, you only can do that by talking about Alma, the mother, Alma Wheatley. And then thinking, okay, of course, I think we enter the house in, I can't remember exactly, let's say 61 or something. So in the very early 60s or even late 50s. And at that point, we would think that she has lived there for something like probably 10 years already, right? Maybe a little less, but about 10 years. So clearly the house was kind of built, or not built, but designed or furbished in the early or mid 50s. At the same time, we are in Kentucky. We kind of learn that they don't have too much money. We also understand that the marriage with this strange man is some sort of joke. Something really went wrong there right in the beginning or even before, and she got stuck there, and she's restless, and she's very lonely, and she's very unhappy. So what she does is what everybody, especially maybe also at that period, did, was kind of building up a facade. So it needs to be like shiny, happy, all-American dream, but you know that there's something wrong because it doesn't really work. And that gives you, I don't know, an idea about the hysteria of the house. I think what we did there was kind of hysterical. I think we had this blue note from the beginning on, because it's even mentioned in the novel that she always wears kind of blue clothes. And in the beginning I thought maybe I get rid of that because, maybe it's the wrong idea, but then I kind of liked it because being blue, has a meaning, especially in the English language. So in a way it did make sense. Then, of course, once we got we went into the research of this, all these kind of design and interior of this kind of home magazines and how you would dress your home at that time. We realized that the hysteria was always there. If you look at the magazines and how bizarrely overdone, they created that. And of course,
a lot of pattern mixing and matching. There's a million things happening.
And another fabric, and another curtain, and another wallpaper, and another matching something. And it's interesting because you mentioned Mad Men in the very beginning. And if you compare that, another reason why, of course, we look different is because we are somewhere else. We're not at this kind of high-end, super slick New York kind of advertising business surrounding everybody's cool and state of the art. We are in very laid back Kentucky in this kind of desperate housewife kind of lonely home, and plus a little bit earlier even. So we play it with a different kind of note. And as I'm explaining it right now, it's kind of an emotional thing. It's not so much design driven actually. It's very much kind of emotion driven. And to do this, the way we work, me being the production designer, one of my most important colleague is what we call the set decorator. And in our case, it's her name is Sabine Scharf, and we also worked together, many times before. And she's a genius in being fearless with colors and with patterns and with also leaving good taste behind. So the joy is always, coming up when something goes really over the top. And in the beginning, we were not quite sure how far we should go. And sometimes talking to Scott about it, the director, and he said, no, there are no limitations. If you say we have the feeling that we go over the top, then he would say, please do and go even further. And that is very important. And once I had the feeling that I really can believe him, we did. And that is then it becomes, it's a joyful process, really.
So one of the rooms in the Wheatley home is ultimately ends up being Beth's bedroom. And you can tell that Alma has prepared this room for what she thinks is like the perfect girl's bedroom. It's so over the top. Talk to me about that, because it continues with the hysteria of the house, but it also says a lot about Alma's mindset. Exactly.
We thought that because they never had a child before, and as you also understand in the conversation that in a way you have the feeling that they are adopting a girl because they cannot get a pet, So this whole idea is a little bit almost dodgy in the beginning, when we have a feeling, okay, he bought her the grand piano. They cannot have pets because he's allergic or something stupid, and then they said, oh, let's have a girl, and she has no idea. And I think our idea was that she has expected to get a doll kind of girl. Because it's hard to order a child from a catalog, so you have to also to deal with what you get. So she's, and our joy was to do something which is not really matching her personality. To say she's a little bit too old, she's way too serious, she is way too intellectual, she's not girly enough. I mean, she's not girly at all anyways, because she doesn't really even know what that would be. So it is more, of course, also something playful for us or for her, or to give her something playful. At the same time, we realized that regardless, the hysteria and how wrong the style for her is, in a way, it doesn't matter for her, because it's the first time in her life that she owns something, like this for herself. And she loves it, even though it's not a matching partner or something, it doesn't matter. So we were trying to make it hilarious, but also, nice, because there's always, or sometimes there's this thin line between something which is like, I don't know, you would never really choose that for yourself, but once you get it, it's like sometimes, getting a hilarious a birthday present from your grandmother. You unpack it and it's something that's like, what the heck is that? You would never bought that for yourself, but because it's from your grandmother, and it's so much filled with her love, and you love her, that you start to love the item, and that's the process, actually.
Let's take a quick break and talk about our sponsor, MZ Education for Creatives. Now, when you go to MZ, you will see hundreds of hours of high-quality video-based filmmaking education in all the categories that we know and love, like directing, cinematography, post-production, visual storytelling, and more. It's basically everything. Everything that we here at Go Creative Show want to know, want to learn, want to be better at. And it's all there at MZ. Now, you can go and buy individual courses, and that's great. But I suggest you become an MZ Pro member, because when you do, you have access to the entire library. Every single thing on there. And believe me, you're going to want it all, because the education is fantastic, but it's really, the secret sauce there is the trainers themselves. On MZ, you've got really world-class trainers. I'm talking about Vincent Laforet, Shane Hurlbut, Philip Bloom. The ARIA Academy is on MZ as well. And Tom Cross, the editor for La La Land in Whiplash, is on there doing a whole course on the art and technique of film editing. And there's just so much more. That's only scratching the surface. So best thing to do, head over to gocreativeshow.com/MZ. Check it out for yourself. If it looks like something you want to participate in, and I think I strongly suggest you do, I got a little secret for you. On checkout, if you do GCS20 as your promo code, GCS20, you're going to get 20% off of whatever you buy there. So that is really just, it's a win-win-win. A little, some extra cash for you. It helps us here at Go Creative Show, helps support our show, and of course it supports MZ in the thriving filmmaking community at large. So check it out for yourself, gocreativeshow.com/MZ. It's time to hone your craft and be a better creator at MZ Education for Creatives. So midway through the season, Alma dies, and Beth now is the owner of the home. And she goes through this process of kind of stripping away some of the over-the-top decor, kind of modernizing it, making it a little bit more hers. Talk to me about that transition.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's exactly like you just explained it. There is this moment when she decides to buy the house and to stay there, and then her next kind of decision is to change it accordingly to her. And we were thinking about how much or how far would we go, because there's also this very nice moment I remember in one of the scenes when she's getting all the old paintings and stuff together and put it in some boxes, and in the middle of this process throwing everything away, all these ugly paintings of animals and stuff, there is there's a picture in a frame of her mother, of Alma, and she kind of touches it, and of course she puts it back, because she doesn't want to get rid of her. So I think that's the balance which was kind of important for us to keep in mind, is that it's not like you hate something and you want to get rid of everything and start from the scratch. It's in between.
And of course, now she has developed her own personality and her own likes. I mean, up until that point, the house was not hers, and she just kind of was thrust into this environment that wasn't her. Now we're getting the first look at what does a Beth home look like.
And the funny thing is with the character is that, and I think that came also through costume, and I like that very much, that she herself has an surprisingly good taste. You can see it how she dresses. And so we thought, okay, once she starts doing this, she's doing pretty well, So it's not like perfect, but it's pretty good. And she would also not do every room because she wants to keep something. For example, we had a very long discussion if she would change the master bedroom of Alma as well. And then we decided she would keep it. She just gets rid of, I think, all her stuff from this cupboard, from all her clothes, but she keeps this hilarious wallpaper and all that because she honors her mother, and she stays in. It's also funny that she moves from her room into the master bedroom. She could stay in her room, but she doesn't. But then she keeps it, and that's again, it's a fine line. And actually, I don't know if some people have kind of recognized that we kind of made a joke, because there's a scene when she is back at Ben Snyder's. You can't really see that exactly where she is, but you see her in something like a furniture department in a department store or something, right? And she kind of moves through this little department and looks around and sits down on a sofa. And the next thing we know is that she's renovating. And we put every single wallpaper, every fabric, and some of the main important furnitures, which we have obviously, decided and collected before, into that department store scene. And everything you see there is later on the stuff she uses at the house. So in a way, the idea is she goes through the department store and just buys everything.
I love that. I want to talk to you about the way that you designed the hotel rooms that Beth is going in and out of throughout the entire series. I mean, like the Wheatley home, she's always kind of put in places not really against her will, but she doesn't have much control over the places she needs to be. She went to the Wheatley home. She was at the orphanage. She goes to hotel rooms that are out of her control. So she's always having to make her own. She always have to make herself comfortable in a variety of spaces around the world. But the hotel rooms also have to reflect where they are in the world. So I'm sure that's a unique challenge in and of itself. And could you talk to us about the way you approached the hotel rooms in these various locations?
Yeah, I think I was trying to explain it before. Every city, for us actually, every step of the journey, every city, represents the next step of the journey. So when we were always, for us, it was always the same. So Mexico, Paris, Moscow, however, it was always just the whole package. So the tournament and the hotel rooms. Actually, we even took care about the upholstery in the planes, in the airplanes when she's flying to the next city. So because we sometimes had even somehow the matching airlines. So look at the upholstery of the Mexican airline seats in the plane. The whole Mexico theme starts already there.
Oh wow.
And so we made this kind of huge decision for every city. And once we have established that, we just went with this kind of style guide through the entire station of the journey, in a way, And always again saying, because we wanted to be so clear and also for the audience to know, where we are exactly, that we always wanted to go very strict with the concept and always very much over the top. So, I mean, like the whole idea was to go over the top in every decision. Every place is a little bit too big or too strange or too much. So we just continue to do that specifically for the hotel rooms as well. Actually, the two hotel rooms, Mexico and Las Vegas, we have built on stage, and we use the same set construction. So the hotel room is the same. We just kind of remodeled it from, I think we started with Mexico, and then we remodeled it into the Las Vegas one,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And one idea we kind of came up, I don't know exactly when we started to do that, was that when she starts to travel alone, we thought, we were thinking about hotel room art, because hotel room art is always terrible because it's kind of meaningless and shallow, and it doesn't want to bother you. And it can be anything. It can also, of course, be pictures of the city you are in or whatever. But we decided we give her some company. So every time we picked some images actually of girls or women. So that she's not so alone. And we also didn't want to bring some man or manly man in there. For example, in Moscow, of course, the first choice would have been, you have these kind of sturdy, socialist workers and communist heroes and stuff like this. But of course, you can also find women doing that, right? So we always try to give her some nice company. So you always find kind of sympathetic or nice women or girls.
So in the artwork, you're saying, in the artwork of the hotels, there were people in them? I didn't pick up on that.
No, it's very subtle.
That's great.
It's just the paintings, at the wall in the hotel rooms.
I love stuff like that. Those I have spoken with production designers before that add little just little Easter eggs or little hints and secrets in the production design, inside jokes, something that's really just for them. I've seen that happen quite a bit in some other TV shows and films. Like, is this just what production designers do? Do you always like to leave a little something in your films that that you can always reference back?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes that happens, but you know what? I think I kind of prefer, the way I just described, and saying I rather leave something personal behind for the character.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of the pictures of the hotel rooms now, and I'm noticing now, yes, in the artwork, there's people. I did not pick up on that before, and I think you're right, because you don't really see that in hotels. The artwork is really, it's nothing. It really isn't anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have a favorite set to design on Queen's Gambit?
Well, I think in a way it still was the Wheatley House, because it was, as I said before, it was such a heart piece of the whole show. And I've also, for me, it's rather than that. Once I would start with the prep and start the design process, I would actually I have to start with something important in a way, and knowing once we know how this will look like, we know much better how everything else will look like. So I think we also started with the Wheatley House, because the funny thing was, of course, again, that we were shooting some few days in Toronto and outside Toronto to cover the few American exterior street kind of locations. And we also were looking for an exterior location for the Wheatley House, and found it in this beautiful neighborhood, in this kind of street, which we cannot find here. Then we painted that blue as well and stuff like this, but it was really only the exterior. We never set a foot inside. And at the same time, the department here, the crew in Berlin, was designing the interior and building the interior house on the sound stage. And that was something where we spent a lot of time and a lot of heart doing that. But honestly, I don't know. I mean, the good thing, and maybe that's why everybody loves it so much, we loved it the same, because whatever we did, every set was funnier than the next. We loved to do the Mexico thing, the tournament. Las Vegas, I think, maybe is the second favorite. But I also love to do all this sinister kind of Soviet Moscow kind of stuff, Yeah,
you really got to design a lot of looks in this series. And there's just so much more to dive into, but we're getting close to the end of our interview. And I wanted, before we leave, to talk about the use of color in the show, because the show takes place at a time period where color is wild anyway. Like every color is being embraced in the 60s, and it's just this big pop of color. But were there specific colors that you were using to drive character development?
I think I cannot use any color, without connecting it to the character or the purpose of the character or the room for the character. So yes, yes. So I think I tried to explain that before going through the city. So every city got a different kind of color. We had a specific color range for the orphanage. In a way, when I look back at it, I think, because it is not blue, but it has this greenish blue and some brown and stuff. Maybe I should have done it a bit stronger, different than the Wheatley House, because the blue of the Wheatley House is kind of the center part of the whole color range. So every other color around, had to reflect or to accept that the blue for the Wheatley House is the center part of the whole thing. But anyways, I think we kind of managed it pretty good, that every city and every place looks so different. And of course, when you look at, I think the biggest contrast is maybe between Paris and Moscow, because Paris is so royal and so flamboyant and decadent in a way, and everything is tiny and kind of baroque, goldish, and I think we had some grayish blue there as well, and we had a lot of gold and black in the tournament. I think that was the main color here. And then you travel to Moscow, where you have almost no colors at all. It's all really so dark and so brown. You have some red, which is almost brown. The brown is almost black, and the black is black anyway. So then you kind of lose the colors, because that's the idea of the place in a way. So that's the simple system behind it, really.
And it seemed to follow her storyline too. And maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but it felt like to me the story kind of began and ended in this place where it was sort of desaturated. There wasn't a lot of color. Like her past, whenever you do the flashbacks, they are always sort of desaturated. Then you go to the orphanage, which certainly doesn't have a lot of color. Her story arc, as she becomes, the successful chess player that she is and ultimately wins, goes through this big wash of color, but it ends in the same place. It ends in this kind of cold, gray, not a lot of color place. And to me, when I watch it, it's saying that it really was the journey of getting from, being exposed to chess and then eventually becoming successful in winning. The journey was something she certainly enjoyed, but what it came down to is her just simply playing chess one-on-one with just a person. It didn't need the flash and the pomp and circumstance of the tournaments. It's just the game itself. And it seems like when you represented just the simplicity of the game, it was always desaturated. And you see that in the very last scene, where she's playing chess on the street. There's really no colors there.
I think that's a very important thing. I mean, beside the fact that, you can also look back and of the colors of chess, which is black and white. And if you're saying that, so there are no colors. There's no green chessboard or something, or you can get one, but it doesn't make sense. But, what you said I think is very fascinating, because it's true. Starting in the basement with Mr. Scheibel, to learn chess, and you always expect something terrible to happen there, which is not happening, because he's just a grumpy old man, but he has a very big heart. And then coming to Moscow and getting into this sinister, intimidating temple of chess. And I think the most important moment then, really, in the payoff, is when the moment she wins, is that her arch enemy Borgov, he kind of gets up and hugs her and smiles for the first time, and is happy for her. And then I think what is also important, because for some reason we always see Moscow when she arrives and enters or leaves the tournament place. It seems to be always dark. You're saying even the afternoon of course in Moscow would be dark. And then suddenly for the first time, when afterwards somehow she sits in that car and she wants to get out and take a walk. It's a cold morning, but it's for some reason it's the first time. Of course, we see like a bright morning, and even though the surrounding is still kind of Soviet, kind of sturdy. I mean, of course, also her being dressed in white, and she looks like a white queen. That's, I think, obviously the idea of the costume, which is great, And then she gets into this group of this old man, and suddenly what has changed is that she realizes that the world can be friendly, because I think those old men, they kind of represent nothing but friendliness, and she understands that she has arrived in the bright. So she comes from the dark, she goes through the colors, and then she ends in the bright. Yeah.
I love that. I always like looking into color stories and just kind of picking that out as it goes, because everything that you see on camera is a decision. It doesn't just happen. And a lot of those decisions are made by production designers. So it's always fun for us to talk to you guys and learn more about your craft and how you came to the decisions that you did on the show. So everybody, you already know Queen's Gambit, available now on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, you must, because it was definitely one of the best shows of 2020, and just such a great, such a great story, and really just visually beautiful. The cinematography is amazing, and of course the production design as well. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, I want to thank Uli Hanish for coming on the Go Creative Show and sharing his experiences as production designer for the Queen's Gambit. Of course, Queen's Gambit is available now on Netflix, so check it out for yourself if you haven't already. I want to thank our sponsor, MZ Education for Creatives, and of course our producer, Connor Crosby, for putting it all together behind the scenes. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. And Dave Siegel over at SiegelSound.com for mixing, mastering, and making the show sound so good. Check them out at SiegelSound.com. All things Go Creative Show are at GoCreativeShow.com, and there you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And I suggest you really look at our YouTube page because we're putting some exclusive content just for our YouTube subscribers. So definitely check that out and let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of everything. Go to our website, leave some comments, get involved in the conversation because this show is for you. So the more you let us know how you're feeling about it, if you have any guest suggestions, throw that on there too. We love the communication, we love the back and forth, and we love all of you for listening. So we will see you next week on another episode of Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.